right now. So let's pivot on into something that's a little bit more heavier, but I think it's very important, something that we want to talk about and needs some attention. And I'm really happy that I have someone like Phil here today because your time span for understanding sports in particular is a lot longer than both me and Demarcus's. And you never let me live that one down when we're arguing sports. So let's start. So there's about a $1 billion settlement that has just been negotiated between the NFL and retired NFL players, in which the league used a scoring system, and the term people have been using to describe this is race norming, in which it justified paying out black players less money, or in some instances, no money at all when they suffered from dementia or severe brain injuries, period, in comparison to their white counterparts. They use a scoring algorithm, and that scoring algorithm just uniquely decided that black men start with a lower cognitive ability than their white counterparts, so thus they had not degraded enough in cognitive ability to receive payouts, whereas white players started with a base higher cognitive ability, so they were more likely to get their payouts in a ton of situations. This petition had 50,000 plus signatures. It was something that took a ton of red tape for them to get across. They had to prove in multiple instances that multiple players, over a vast amount, like 20,000 players, or the majority of them, because the majority of the league is black, would have received payouts that did not if they were assumed to be white based off the NFL's algorithm.
I mean,
Let me hear what you got to say.
You also don't mention here, which I think is important, that when some of these claims were brought and then denied, and then black players sued the league and the fund and the lawyer in charge of the league, the fund, the NFL went to the sticks with this. Like, they really were trying to deny these men their just due into perpetuity based on what is functionally phrenology. These neuropsychologists came in and they were like, well, black people's heads aren't as big, so they can't have as big of brains. Therefore, they can't have as much cognitive degradation as the white players. What are you even fucking talking about at this point? Like, reading
this
the
is
stories,
Darwinism.
What?
This is Darwinism.
Yeah, it's phrenology, man. It's that same old biological determinism that has been used since the beginning of time to say that black people aren't as smart as white people. And every so often, every 20, 30 years, it crops itself up. But this is the same justification they used in many instances to deny blacks the ability to play quarterback in the league. They were just like, oh, well, they'll never be smart enough to read defenses. They'll never be smart enough to be a quarterback. How could they be a quarterback? These little brains they got. And this shit is right in the NFL. It runs through almost every single segment of the NFL. So it's really no surprise to see it crop up in the payouts of, for CTE. It's zero surprise to see that. Now that they've been outed, though, the NFL came out and gave an apology. I don't know if you saw that, their apology.
Their apology was kind of BS.
Like,
they were like, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, they were like, we're sorry if we hurt anybody or anybody's family. Thoughts and prayers.
That's not really wrong. And they even went as far to say these systems that we created and put in place were actually supposed to solve these problems, not create them in the first place.
Well, I mean, that's some Supreme Court logic. We'll solve racism by being racist. So the most racist we can be, we will solve racism in this way. So, I mean, it's that logic is prevalent when trying to figure things out legally. It makes sense to legal scholars as well as the lawyers, and it gets implemented in so many instances, and it just denies black people the same recompense that they would give to any white person.
Well, I mean, when I first saw this, I was kind of shocked it was still happening. Because the NFL's had a lot of attention on concussions, on CTE, on brain trauma, There's been movies made about it, other lawsuits with players to set up this fund, I believe, in the first place, or a fund to pay out for injured, retired players, etc. And so I would imagine that it has to go back at least a little bit. I can't imagine the NFL just started during all of that to do the race norming.
No, 1990s is when they started this system. So it's been going on for literally 30 plus years.
Well, I mean, you know, for years, you have to understand, for years, they denied that there was a concussion problem. So
yeah,
the fact that when they finally got sued and it was proven that there was a concussion problem, there was an overwhelming amount of evidence. It's zero surprise that they did the best that they could in order to save as much money as they could. I mean, this is the definition of capitalism meets racism.
I mean, I think of the NFL as no different than big tobacco or big oil when it came to, you know, fervently defending that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. And, you know, the NFL, they aren't going to change. Their argument right now is they'll get rid of the system. But right now, there's no other system in place for them to replace it with.
They are creating a new one.
They're like, there's no ready system. So until we get a new one, this is what we got. But
they tried that. The settlement did not allow them to do it. On Wednesday, literally on June 2nd. Like on June 2nd, they stopped using the system. Like they did not, like 7 days from when we are currently recording is the day the NFL pledged to stop using the system. The NFL said they got a panel of neuropsychologists that are supposed to create a new system that includes 2 women and 3 black doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And they say that the replacement norms they create will be applied prospectively and retroactively. So all players that were denied prior to this will then receive their hopefully just due.
I mean, we'll see.
I mean, in my opinion, the only real way to get rid of the problem here is to when the NFL player files for this, you strip away the name and the race and you make them a random number. And that's how
they're evaluated. Like a double blind system.
That's the only way to do.
I mean, okay. It has been common knowledge for a very long time that of all of the professional leagues, the NFL is by far the worst at dealing with the people who are no longer in the league. The people who have retired from the league, they let them degenerate to nothing, and then they take zero responsibility for the impact that the game took on their body. And they just have let them for years, before even the concussion things came to light, for years just degenerate. This has been a story, how they treat the former NFL players since I can remember, and I'm pretty old. So it's just another part of a long link chain of where they have discarded the gladiators who played and don't worry about any of that, especially since most of them were black. They just didn't care.
But the NFL, that's what they have been for their entire existence, as a bunch of rich white men. And so I don't think that we can say that white people have changed very much this past year. And this country has taught us a whole lot, or exposed a whole lot to some people at least, that this is the way things are. And a
lot of people will listen to this and they'll say, keep race out of sports. They'll say, why are you making these things about race? They'll say these things are so long ago. The NFL created this system in the 90s. And this system has been systematically preventing black players, which the majority of the league is black, from getting cognitive payouts from the dementia, CTE, etc., that comes from playing the game.
It would be funny to hear someone say about this particular issue, to keep race out of sports, in a world where the league named it race norming, not us. Their psychologists, their neuropsychologists named it race norming. So we had nothing to do with it.
It was always already about it.
Had nothing. I love that.
I
love that. Okay. On that note, that was your tee off.
Ooh, spill that tea, sis. Spill that tea, sis.
That was great.
The Fly Route Pod. The Fly Route Pod. The Fly Route Pod. The Fly Route Pod.
We want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to listen to this video. Did you know that this video is part of a larger Fly Route podcast? Look us up wherever you watch podcasts. We are on Spotify, Apple Music, everywhere. Take the time, subscribe. We appreciate you.
While we have you here, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. And while you're at it, don't forget to hit the notification bell. Otherwise, you will miss some of our YouTube videos. That's just the way YouTube works. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Fly Route Pod.